Well, good morning, and thank you, Richard. Just a couple of stats just worth bearing in mind. The built environment as a whole accounts for something like 50% of carbon emissions in one way or another. And the aviation industry accounts for 3%. And when you consider the amount of work going in to get carbon out of aviation, you can see that even if they reduce that by half, it barely scratches the problem. So you can see the challenge that the construction and the property industry has in trying to actually make a meaningful reduction in the carbon emissions. But it is very high on the agenda, and I think a lot of work is going on, and a lot of the focus is going on. Sometimes solutions don't always deliver the right outcomes, and as we're seeing with the issues around aluminium cladding, a lot of which was done to try and make buildings warmer, so less heat and use. They have had their problems, as we saw with Grenfell. So sometimes the solutions aren't always providing the right answers. But looking more broadly around what's happening in property and construction over the last year or so, I think the Brexitis that people thought might have happened with firms moving out of the UK and going to Europe doesn't seem to have come off. In a recent report by CBRE, they said this is pretty much stalled. There's been little trickles here and there, but there's been nothing sustained. And I think perhaps the pandemic probably stopped that in its tracks and has delayed anything. And perhaps maybe now with new methods of working, then people have felt that there isn't the need to do it because they've got places, particularly financial firms, have got bases all over Europe and what have you, where they can flex their accommodation requirements to deal with the needs they have at any point in time. As we saw in the poll there is going to be more working from home, but not a massive reduction in office space. So it means places are going to be reconfigured, places less densely packed as before. So in some respects, costs may go up, but there doesn't seem to be much holding back on building. In fact, if anything, on some of those aspects now, we're looking to see a lot more creative offices being considered and being more flexible, and not only just taking into account CO2 emissions and all that, but actually wider accessibility so that it's much easier for everybody to use office spaces when they want to do them. There is a steady trickle back of people going to work, and only this week, Transport for London, for example, in London published statistics that showed between the sort of the 7 and 8 o'clock time, the tap-ins on buses and on the tubes were up 30% on the previous week. So it does reflect the fact that I think there's a lot more confidence now of people going back to work. Overall, though, in the industry, output is about 5% short at the moment of pre-pandemic levels, and infrastructure and private housing are leading the way. And currently, industry sentiment is at record highs, despite the fact that there are issues over labour supply and material supply. And these have become quite severe because when they hit the front pages, you know about it. But there will be, there is sort of increasing workloads as the economy is opening up. So we're looking for a very good and a very strong second half to 2021. On the private housing, there's a lot of government support for that because that's a key manifesto. The government want to see 300,000 houses a year being built by 2025, and we're still a long way short of that. I think this year we'll probably end up with about 180,000. But there's also a lot of issues around repairs, renewals and renovations, and some really big skill shortages there. So yes, it does make the front page. Tender prices, though, are going up, partly again due to material shortages, partly due to labour shortages, but also down to the fact that there is so much activity taking place. General commercial is at the low end, but industrial and logistics is doing very well. I mean, that's in sort of layman's terms, sheds, and prime quality warehousing and sheds and what have you are in quite short supply. And as business moves from the high street to online, good quality warehousing and all that is absolutely vital. And with possibly supply shortages as well, being able to carry sufficient inventories is really important. So you're seeing rents increasing quite markedly in there, and some places like the northeast of England and Yorkshire up 16% on the year for that really good quality stuff. So yes, there are strong pipelines of work ahead. We've got HS2, of course, but the government is committing itself in its levelling up process to spending a lot more money. So I think the industry is feeling very chipper on that. The challenge, of course, along with that is dealing with how do we take carbon out of what we do? And they're looking at everything from, moving away from using diesel for the most mundane stuff on deliveries and on site and so on, to involving technology a lot more in the design of what they're doing. There are some downsides, though, and very practical, and I think it's worthwhile me mentioning them here. I've got no more time to go, but I would just say, watch out for the building safety crisis. It has an impact on what people are doing, and for professionals, particularly very young professionals at risk of bankruptcy. And I think that's what firms need to deal with. So, Richard, thank you very much.